All right, let's jump into one of the biggest, oldest debates in all of human history. We're talking about two absolute giants of philosophy, Plato, the dreamer, the idealist, and his star student, the super practical, down-to-earth Aristotle. And for more than 2,000 years, their totally different answers to one huge question have shaped, well, pretty much everything we think about ourselves.
And it all comes down to this. Seriously, just for a second, forget the old guys in togas and ask yourself, what are you? Are you just your body, your brain, your bones, all the physical stuff? Or are you something else? A consciousness, maybe a spirit, that's just kind of borrowing this body for a while? This isn't just some dusty old question. It's right at the heart of who we think we are.
So, let's start with the teacher, Plato. For him, the answer was crystal clear, and honestly, pretty epic. He was convinced our true selves, our real identity, isn't here in this messy physical world at all. Nope, it's somewhere else, somewhere perfect.
I mean, talk about a dramatic idea. Plato saw our bodies not as our home, but as a cage, a prison of flesh that actually holds back our true, pure, immortal soul. It traps us here. So just think about that. For Plato, you aren't your body, you're a soul that's just stuck with one for now.
Okay, so you gotta wonder, how did he even get to such a wild idea? Well, Plato was stuck on a really interesting puzzle. Think about this. How do you know what a perfect circle is? I mean, you've never actually seen one, right? Any circle you draw or find in the real world is going to be a little bit wobbly, a little imperfect. The same thing goes for big ideas like perfect justice or true beauty. If we've never seen them, where does this knowledge of perfection even come from?
His answer is what he called the argument from recollection. It goes like this. 1, we all have these ideas of perfection in our heads. 2, we never ever see actual perfection with our own eyes in this world. So 3, that knowledge must have been born with us. It has to be innate. And 4, the grand finale, if we're born with it, then our soul must have existed somewhere before we were born. A perfect place he called the world of forms, where it saw all these perfect ideas up close. So for Plato, learning isn't really learning anything new. It's just remembering what your soul already knew all along.
And to prove this wasn't just some theory, Plato tells this amazing story. His teacher Socrates goes up to this young slave boy who's never had a day of schooling in his life, definitely no geometry classes. And just by asking him a series of clever questions, not giving him any answers, he leads the boy to figure out a really tough geometry problem all by himself. Plato's point? See? The knowledge was already in him. It was in his soul, just waiting to be woken up.
But Plato's most famous student, Aristotle, was, let's just say, not buying it. Aristotle was a hands-on guy, a biologist, someone who trusted what he could actually see and measure. He looked at his teacher's grand world of forms up in the clouds and decided to drag the whole conversation right back down to earth.
And he was not subtle about it. This quote is basically one of the most savage takedowns in the history of philosophy. To Aristotle, this whole other perfect world was just nonsense, an extra step we didn't need. He believed all the answers we're looking for aren't in some other dimension. They're right here, in the world we can touch and see.
So this gives us two completely different pictures of what a person is. On one side, you've got Plato's dualism, the idea that the soul and body are two totally separate things, just stuck together. But for Aristotle, they're not separate at all. They're like two sides of the same coin. The soul isn't some ghost driving a body around, it's the very thing that makes the body what it is.
Aristotle came up with a brilliant analogy for this. Picture a block of soft wax and a metal stamp. When you press the stamp into the wax, it leaves a shape, an imprint. Now, can you take that imprint out of the wax? No, of course not. The imprint isn't a separate thing. It is the shape of the wax now. That's what the soul is to the body for Aristotle. It's the form, the blueprint, the function that makes a pile of atoms into a living, working human being.
And what exactly is that unique blueprint for a human? What makes us us? For Aristotle, it all came down to one thing, our ability to think rationally. A plant's soul is just its ability to grow and eat. An animal's soul is that, plus the ability to move and feel. But the human soul, our special ingredient, is reason. That's our defining function.
Okay, so we've got these two powerhouse ideas battling it out. An immortal soul that's separate from the body versus a soul that is the body's function. And you might be thinking, cool history lesson, but what's that got to do with me?
Well, it turns out this ancient debate is still happening all around us. We've just changed the vocabulary.
You can see their fingerprints everywhere. Plato's idea of a separate soul that lives on, that's the foundation for so many religions and spiritual beliefs. Anytime someone talks about an afterlife or a spirit that survives death, that's a fundamentally Platonic idea. And Aristotle, his view that the soul is the function of the body, well, that's basically the philosophical grandpa of modern neuroscience, which looks at the mind as an activity of the physical brain.
Now, let's be real. Modern science has thrown a few wrenches into Aristotle's way of thinking. Things he called a form, like the redness of an apple, we now explain with physics, atoms and photons and wavelengths of light. And, most importantly, that form of a human, our reason, it seems completely tied to our physical brain. I mean, we know that damage to the brain can completely change or even destroy a person's ability to reason.
But, and this is a huge but, here's the twist. Even though we can link the mind to the brain, science has not solved the biggest mystery of all. We still have absolutely no idea how a 3-pound lump of wet gray stuff, just a bunch of cells firing electrical signals, can create the feeling of being you. How does it produce consciousness? The experience of seeing red, the feeling of being me. This is called the hard problem of consciousness, and as long as it's unsolved, this whole ancient debate is still wide open.
Which brings us right back to the beginning, but we can frame the question in a more modern way. Are we basically a ghost, or are we a machine?
So really, it boils down to this. Are you on Team Plato, with the classic ghost in the machine? The idea that your true self is some kind of non-physical spirit that's just driving your body around like a car? Or are you on Team Aristotle, with the more modern spin, the software of the brain? The idea that your mind isn't a separate thing at all, but just what happens when your biological hardware gets complex enough to run the program we call consciousness. Plato and Aristotle kicked this whole thing off more than 2,000 years ago, and in a lot of ways, we're still standing right where they were. Science has given us incredible new tools, but it hasn't given us the final answer. So the question is still on the table, and it's a question for every single one of us. Are you a soul that has a body, or is your soul simply what your body does? What do you think?